And we're back. My apologies for the technical difficulties at the end of last session. Working from home, as many of you have experienced over the pandemic, can be an interesting to navigate the technology, and the computer went down. So my apologies. And as we go into this final session, again, please fill out the second form link if you have not done so. We truly value your feedback on the day, and we'll take it into consideration in order to make future summits even better. So with that, I would like to welcome our guests for the final sessions. So we have Michelle Matranga and Sam Needham of the Silicon Valley Bank. And Samantha is the head of marketing and innovation and an accomplished digital product and marketing leader. And Michelle is the director of marketing analytics with over a decade of experience in the industry. So Samantha, Michelle, welcome. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you for the intro, Peter. So this is Not Your Grandma's Marketing Analytics, where we are going to walk you through the impact that analytics can have on a marketing organization and business as a whole. So how do we really get in there and drive the business forward? That's what we want to talk to you about today. Can you go to the next slide, please? Perfect. So we want to dig into that this is more than just reporting. We're not sitting just on the back end, seeing how things are being done and then providing reporting and insights based on that. We're actually earning a seat at the table and then pushing the business forward from a marketing perspective and as a whole when we look at business objectives. Go ahead. So to that end, we don't just provide reporting. We actually drive business impact. We do this through a number of ways, but you definitely need to have a marketing analytics team that is helping to drive and that sits at the table in order so we can really talk about what the overarching business objectives are and how analytics can actually help you achieve those ends. Sam, anything to add on that point?
Yeah, I think what gets me really excited about where we're at and where we're going is that marketing analytics organizations and digital marketing is becoming such a core part of how we interact with our clients and prospects and deliver that value. And one of the things that we'll get into is really how we within SVB went from not even having an in-house marketing analytics team to scaling very quickly and through a pretty, I would love to say it was a very well thought out plan, but really a lot of that sort of happened organically through delivery and strategy. So, going into the next slide, when we stepped back and we said, how do we earn a seat at the strategic table? For us, when I think about it, it started with really understanding our internal landscape and our, individuals that wanted to make an impact and drive return, right? So when you're in that building mode and you're trying to understand what's important to others, there's this currency of exchange. And so, if you're selling into the CMO, you might be talking about the value delivering to the brand or client acquisition. If you're talking to the CFO or others in the finance space, you might be talking about how you can drive that ROI or have some cost efficiencies. If you're thinking about, the COO organization, it might be around operational efficiencies and how to reduce some of that manual overhead. And, with sales, it might be something around, lead quality or, how to really allow that team to build those relationships with their clients. And so, every group has those specific currencies and places. And for us, where we started was actually around the experimentation and testing piece. So about 3 to 4 years ago, when we were looking at how to reinvent svb.com, we took a very data-driven approach. And this was actually the first time that we were doing user testing and really leveraging data to drive insights. And so what we were able to do is build this experimentation roadmap and really leverage this idea of data-driven marketing. And through that, I would say we had many experiments that ran. Not all were successful, right? We did have some that we fondly called learners, places where we learned that really didn't help reduce the friction or improve our client experiences. And so we continue down this path of, personalization through leveraging data to drive experimentation and testing. And so that's really where it started. And I think for those of us that have been in the space a long time, it's not surprising that sort of web was that first place that we really started to have that strategic seat at the table, because marketing analytics, if you think back right into the 90s, you had the web counter, and then you really sort of started through that web property. But what we found is, as we started getting traction around experimentation and testing, we wanted to optimize, right? We needed to go to more channels. We really started to think about the metrics that mattered. And so it was innovating through iteration, right? How do we make what we do better? How do we continue to stay on top of what our prospects and clients want and start delivering those experiences through looking at the data and the insights that we're seeing across multiple channels? And so, really for us, we started with experimentation and testing. We're absolutely still doing that, but we really quickly moved into this broader state of optimization. And as we started to look across channel and going into these different places, this is really where we started to look at attribution and, moving away from some of those basic measurement strategies into things around true business value, right? And for us, we're not an e-commerce company, right, or anything like that. So there's definitely an importance of understanding all the different touch points that sit within marketing and also within other organizations. So that's really when we started looking at some of those metrics that matter. We needed to start to plan, how are we thinking about and partnering with different teams to think about that advanced attribution. And I would say, from a journey standpoint, we've been on this journey for a few years now. This is really sort of where we're sitting. And so both sort of looking at, where we've come over the last couple of years, and then where we're at and where we're going. And that's really where we get into some of that predictive modeling aspects, right? In the sense that being able to deliver, what's that next best action that, a client or prospect is interested in, and reducing that friction for them, and using our data to, make us better marketers and make sure that we're delivering the value for the customer. So for us, while we haven't really expanded as much as we'd wanted to in that sort of predictive space, that's absolutely on the path on how we're earning the seat at the table and moving away from sort of the reactive reporting side and really getting into that predictive space.
Next slide. Thank you, Sam. So once you earn that seat at the table, how do you make sure that analytics stays there and is actually driving change in the business and actually providing real value? So the way in which we look at it is it needs a number of components. And those components are having the right team. And I'll kind of dig into these and break these apart a little as we go. But just at a top line level, having the right team, the right people in place, and a dedicated team to actually look at all of the marketing and all of the overarching business strategies and begin to measure those and the impacts of each of those individual tactics is really key. Looking at a measurement strategy. So not just kind of grabbing things as they're thrown your way, but actually having a plan going into each individual strategy, understanding how do we measure this and what are we actually trying to achieve? That's really key. Having the right tooling and advanced tooling, I'll kind of, again, dig into these and break these apart a bit, but there's a number of kinds of tools that an analytics team needs in order to be effective, and overlaying that with the right methodology. So Sam touched a little bit on that advanced attribution and predictive modeling. That's where methodology comes into play. There's a number of different methodologies, and we'll dig into that, but really digging in and understanding what methodology am I using? Is it the right one? And kind of how, through what lens to look at those for each individual thing that you're measuring is really key. And the last piece is storytelling. So actually having a vision around what are we trying to achieve being able to measure that and then being able to evangelize that throughout an organization is really key. Next slide, please. So the first step of that was the right team. And the right team can look like a number of different things, but you do need to have certain things in place. Strategic leadership is one of those. So you can't just have a ton of analysts that are catching things and providing insights kind of on an ad hoc basis. You do need to have some vision kind of at the helm, and making sure that vision and that strategic leadership aligns with the larger company goals, and that person is really looking at what are we trying to do as an organization, and make sure that all of the analysts and all of the team is aligned on that vision. Also having analysts with marketing knowledge. This is a big part of kind of where we are right now as well, in trying to really up-level and mature a marketing analytics organization, to not only get people who are amazing analysts and fantastic with numbers and can really dig in there and provide fantastic reporting, but those people who know what that reporting means. Those insights that actually have actionable recommendations attached to them, to understand what is our next best step. That's huge. So really getting people involved and providing transparency to that marketing analytics team is huge. Data engineering is another piece here that can either sit within the group or as a close partnership outside of a marketing analytics organization. But knowing where your data is coming from, how hygienic it is, and really understanding how is it structured, what's the data governance, and how do we use this data properly? That's really key. So having a really close partnership with data engineering is also very important, especially as you get to the higher level and more advanced attribution and predictive modeling pieces. You are going to want to overlay data science, but until you have data engineering and create that, those data warehouses with very hygienic data structured in a way that is useful to you, you can't really proceed forward. So you have the data engineering and then a close partnership and data science on that team as well, to understand what algorithms do we need to overlay, what kind of things do we need to be calculating. And once we're able to kind of think through those things, making sure that data science team is also very aware of that marketing piece as well. So what are we actually trying to achieve? That's really key. So as you get into predictive modeling and advanced attribution, data science and data engineering become really big pieces of the puzzle that really align closely with leadership and analysts that truly understand marketing and those business objectives. So those are all really key pieces. Sam, anything to add on that, or should we proceed?
Yeah, I think something that I get really excited about, and something that's special about SVB, is we're very mission and values based as an organization. And so, whether you're looking across these areas and you have 2 people or you have 200 people on your team, I think culture is so important. We heard on some of the previous sessions the adaptability to change, that there's ever-present new things going on, from, policies and different privacy laws to, different technologies and capabilities that we have through partners. And it's super important that we think about our teams and our culture and really create that place of learning. One of the other things that's really important to us, and it's great to kind of see these areas, is having that diverse perspectives. Right. So making sure that you're leveraging your team and listening and really creating those spaces for innovation and experimentation, and having different perspectives across the organization be able to, come together and help solution, I think really makes for a super strong marketing analytics team.
Perfect. Next slide, please. All right, so like I said, we're going to dig into all of those components that make up a marketing analytics team. And one of those things was a measurement strategy. So not just jumping in kind of willy-nilly and grabbing requests as they come in, but actually truly having a plan forward. So you need to actually define and plan what you're attempting to measure. And that does need to come with a close partnership with all of your business partners across a marketing or larger organization. But it does need to also sit within the marketing analytics department itself. So creating that plan and kind of driving that strategy and that strategy formulation is huge. Then aligning and executing. So getting kind of all those head nods around the table that yes, this is the plan we want to move forward with. Yes, this is the tooling we want to use. Yes, this is the methodology we need to use. So getting that buy-in and that executive buy-in is huge. And in order to kind of execute that strategy, make sure, again, there's a plan in place there. Everybody knows their role. How are we implementing this? What data needs to go into it, what teams need to be a part of it. That'll help you really align and make sure that you're executing in the right way. The next step is finally to measure and analyze. This is the one that I think analytics teams are very aware of, but this is kind of where it sits in that overarching picture of this kind of cycle of analytics. So measuring and analyzing, actually creating that performance analysis, but then reviewing and refining it is really a really key step that I think gets missed sometimes. So actually, once you have that performance measurement, truly understand, what does this mean? How do we create recommendations off of this? How are we pushing the business forward through this data? How are we making data-driven decisions? And then, did it do the thing we thought it was going to do? Whatever strategy was in place. If it did, great, let's continue. How do we continue? Or if it didn't, let's refine the process. And then really creating that continuous optimization cycle, and then going back to, okay, so we've done this, what next? How do we make it better? It's an iterative process, it's a cycle. Marketing analytics never really stops. It just keeps getting bigger and better. And it's kind of through this cycle that happens. Next slide, please. All right, so the big piece and the part I get really excited about, quite honestly, is the methodology. Sam's kind of laughing there. She knows I get very, very nerdy about especially attribution methodology. So there's a number of ways you'll want to understand how to kind of go into this measurement and analysis phase. So how are you actually measuring that performance? That's what our methodology is. So there's a number of ways you can go about it. There's multi-touch attribution, a unified model, and marketing mix modeling. What we really focus on, and what I focused on mostly in the past especially, has been this multi-touch attribution. And the reason for that is because it takes in all of that online data. And that's kind of where you get your fractional attribution. That's where, you know, GA360 really comes into play. And all the other tooling that's available. So there's rules-based, which you can have like a linear regression model. You can have that time decay. You can have, you know, the last click models, things like that. But really, as you kind of progress and advance through this process, you start to get to a more data-driven model. And that's where you really get those advanced algorithms. That's where you get your, you know, collaborative game theory, things like that, where you're really looking at each point in the customer journey. What is that interplay with marketing, and how are you actually measuring each individual touch point, and how does that actually drive a final conversion? That's where it gets really fun and interesting. That's where you need that data engineering. That's where you really need data science. And that's where you really need that tooling as well. So GA360, for instance, has a lot of this built within it. And there's also other models you can lay on top if you have a really advanced data science team as well. There's unified models that actually take a little bit of that online and offline behavior and pull them together. You'll still need multi-touch attribution in this case for that online piece. And you kind of weave in the offline pieces as well. And then for market mix modeling, MMM, as it's sometimes known, that's where you really are looking at that offline and that more traditional media in order to really pull all of that data together and truly understand also all the other things that are kind of happening in the world and happening around to kind of like, is it weather? Is it politics? All of these different things that influence customer behavior. How are those also factoring in to, you know, customers' decision making? So pulling all of these things together, having at least your eye on all of these individual pieces, truly understanding your customer journey and what's getting them to make decisions is what can help you actually kind of create better outcomes for your business. Anything to add there, Sam, or should we go to the next slide?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I like to push our teams to think about too is don't stop with just what you can measure today. Really set that right vision about how to drive business value, and then start to back into what would it take to get there. And you know, sometimes many of us are dealing with data landscapes that are less than optimal. And so, you know, instead of just sort of starting with, okay, well, this is what I can measure, so this is what's in my measurement plan, really plan that target state and back into it. I find that education component is really important as you walk through some of the things that Michelle's discussed.
Great. Next slide, please. All right, there was one more slide, but it is just about storytelling. So we can do this without a slide. So really what's important here is that marketing analytics and analytics in general is an active participant in setting the vision for an organization. Really having that seat at the table, earning that place, and then continuing to push the business forward and truly understanding what all of these numbers mean and how you're actually going to use those to drive change in an organization, being able to evangelize that throughout the company, and being able to kind of continue to have conversations with your business partners and truly understand your customers. So that's where that storytelling component comes in. It's not about just looking at the numbers, it's about what do these numbers mean and how do we actually use this information? And that's actually what really creates a healthy marketing analytics organization.
Thank you so much. I have a gigantic smile on my face because everything that you're talking about is really resonating back to our first session with Shauna today, talking about testing and iterating, talking about, we spent a little time discussing organizational change. And what we find for customers who can accelerate their digital transformations is analytics typically sits at the center of that. And so we're seeing more organizations like yourselves adopting analytics and having a seat at the table. And so, you know, the more we can see this from advertisers, the better off you're going to be in understanding, obviously, your customer journey, what narratives that you need to tell them, where your customers are. And I think this is a really great way to cap off the afternoon. So Michelle and Sam, thank you so much. I got a lot out of your session, and I hope everyone else did as well.